Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairy Tales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory, and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page, which is a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And those who love it, really. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to read a series of stories about folklore and fairy tales. My mic is saying it's coming in pretty hot. Are we topping out on the output there? If you are coming to this stream for the first time and you're watching it live, you should know that there is a live chat that is bustling up right now, growing a whole crop of potatoes, who are all chatting amongst each other. Say hello to Jumstore, GS, Tammy Morelli, Uncle Kitty, Witchery. Actually, I don't know if I've seen Uncle Kitty yet. We haven't. And I'm sure there are more lurking. But if you're not watching this live and you do just want to get to stories, of which there are many tonight, then check down in the description below. There will be timestamps for the beginning of each of the stories tonight. If you're just looking for the one from the title, which is currently about a snake crawling in your mouth, the title's pretty self-descriptive of that one. It's not a very long one. If you just want to jump ahead to that one, go right ahead. We're going to be reading a series of tales translated by Jürgen Hubert for Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles. I'll say more on that as we go along. You're loud, but it doesn't sound like it's peaking. Still concerns me a bit. Okay, I'm going to turn my max down just a bit. I think it might be a little too hot. Okay. We're talking tonight about snakes. Which I realized when I was looking at topics to do for today. I realized I'd never done anything on snakes. Which is wild, because they're pretty significant in folklore. Witchery says I spoke first and got mentioned after an imagined Uncle Kitty. I wasn't really reading through the chat. I was sort of just going from a presumed memory. It is good to see you, though, Witchery. Okay, so tonight's tales were recently translated to English by Jürgen Hubert, who is a mainstay translator for our channel, and that makes it sound like he works for us. He doesn't. He has a Patreon called Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles that you absolutely should support. It's not a lot of money, and it goes towards a very good cause, which is he is translating a bunch of things that were put in, come on, brain, come back online. Archives in German, but then they didn't ever really get translated to English. Some of them were never translated. Many of these stories have never been translated to English, and these are the first time. And given that they came out basically last month from Jürgen, I might be the first person reading them aloud in English. I don't know for sure, though. I don't want to make any overreaching claims, but it stands to reason. All right. Well, I won't ramble, because it is actually very hot, as people have noted in the chat, and I try to avoid turning my air conditioning on because it does pick up on the mic, so the more stories I can get through before this room gets super hot, the better. Witchery says, how wide are these people keeping their mouths when they're open? Are they keeping their mouths when they're asleep? No kidding. I agree with your sentiment. All right. Our first tale of the night comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a collection of translated German folklore from Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at the Patreon, pinned in a comment down below if this is no longer live. And our first tale that we're reading is a couple of little short anecdotes from a region called Ahrensberg and Wiesenberg. So these are snake legends from Ahrensberg and Userin. In Ahrensberg near Wiesenberg, there once lived a day laborer with his wife. They had a child, a small girl, which always looked pale and sickly. She never wanted to eat anything but milk and bread, and as soon as she had received those items, the little one immediately went outside the threshold of the house. One day, the parents watched her and were horrified to see that a snake was eating out of the child's bowl. But then the child was not satisfied that the snake only licked up the milk and hit it on the head with her spoon without fear, saying the words, "Toad, eat the chunks as well." Then the father jumped outside and killed the snake. But since then, the child slowly wasted away. This is a good introductory. We're not done this segment, but this is a good introductory one. It introduces a bunch of concepts we're going to see repeated as we go through this. One of the more consistent ones that, chat, I'm open to theories, is killing the snake kills this person somehow. This is from the same section, but a different anecdote. The gold which the Snake King and his wife wear on their heads as crowns is supposed to be the purest on earth. Just as a note here from the footnotes of Jürgen, the snakes that they're referring to have a yellow marking on them that is believed to be what informs the idea that they wear crowns of gold. The snake rulers are very worried about the possible loss of their crowns and know how to punish brazen thieves, but on the other hand, they sometimes gift their crowns as rewards. The following legends from Userin, near Neustrelitz, tell of such occurrences. Around noon, the snakes tended to lounge in the sun and put down their crowns. This was also known to a rider, who put down his handkerchief next to the road. When he had attained the king's crown in this sly manner, he hurried away with his loot. But as soon as the king realized his loss, he gathered all the snakes of his realm around him, and with these he followed the thief, who saw the considerable fright that the bodies of the snake rose up high from the ground and darted forth in a high arc. But his fast steed soon carried him to his manor, and he gratefully tapped the neck of his horse with the words, "Well, you aided me loyally." But then he was pierced by a snake which had hidden undetected within the horse's tail. Once, some farmers' children herded geese, and as they had heard a lot about the Snake King and his fondness for shiny white things, they washed their aprons in the lake and spread them next to each other in the sun, so that the Snake King would put his crown on them. But they did not want a poor girl in their midst, who only wore a coarsely woven apron, and thus forced her to put her apron down alone, apart from the others. However, the Snake King crawled over all those fine aprons and gifted his crown to precisely this girl. Now, this last tale, to me, is more transparent about its purposes, because it sounds like, make sure you wash your apron until it's very, very white. And if you leave it down by the river, maybe the Snake King will give you a crown, but only if it's white enough. Like, I feel like that It must be a little tale to get kids to wash their aprons. Of course, in this version of the tale, it wants to highlight the fact that, I guess merit is what it looks for, not merely station. All right. Our next tale is also from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles. It's called The Snake King. And it concerns this idea of snake royalty. Not all the tales, by the way, are about snake royalty. But the first few are. Some are about a very unexpected properties of snakes. The last few especially. So this tale is called The Snake King. It comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated by Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at the Patreon pinned down in the comments below. In the middle of a forest close to the city of Zulz, there is a small pub called Muchenkrog, or the Gnat's Keg. People claim that many years ago, a large snake with a golden crown on its head frequently appeared here. The gold was purer than all the other gold on the earth and emitted a rather strange shine. The locals called the animal the Snake King because of its crown. And the old owner of the Muchenkrog at the time had a small son who had a deep friendship with the snake. He ate, drank, played with the snake, and the snake was around him all the time and never did him any harm. Much later, when the boy had grown into a tall adult man, he killed the Snake King. Why, the legend does not say, and gifted the crown to his parents. His parents then sold the crown and became rich people thanks to this. That has that real old world folklore quality. By the time we get into sort of medieval era, the status of animals is kind of mixed. But in the old world, it was like considered sort of an obvious good to go in and kill some large beast. Like that was a noble feat, of course. All right, carrying on. The next tale also comes to us from Jürgen Hubert's Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, and it's called The Snake Dance. Two men from Kovitz decided to go fishing at the lake on a Sunday. They cast their lines, but no fish wanted to bite. Then the men started to swear. Suddenly a whole swarm of snakes came over the water, and there was a snake with a golden crown leading them. The fishers, overcome with dread, fled onto a nearby hill, but after the snakes had reached the shore, they followed them there as well. And they started an eerie dance around the crowned snake in their center. And the fishers regretted their swearing and shiveringly returned back to Kovitz. There you go. Don't swear, people, or the a swarm of snakes will get you. Actually, fun fact about the later show: there will be swearing. I have a story that involves swearing. Very mild single swear word, but I think it's the only time I've actually sworn on the stream, so we'll see. You're here for history. Not important history, and not any that's going to be remembered, but history all the same. All right. One of the things I do like about Jürgen, the way that he deals with translation, some of these things don't really have titles. So Jürgen gives them sort of the most descriptive titles. You know, it's helpful for archival purposes, but sometimes they're so specifically descriptive that it does make me smile. And this is one of them because it's called Snake Crawls into the Body of a Sleeping Girl. What do you think it's about? Getting a little warm, so I'm going to imagine it's cooler by putting a light rain sound on. Our next tale is called Snake Crawls into the Body of a Sleeping Girl. Chat's having a good time with this one. Hey man, content warning. This is body horror. It's unsettling. So if the premise spelled out by that title makes you feel weird, maybe just skip to the next one. Actually, not the next one, because the next one's also about this. Anyways, it also comes to us from Jürgen Hubert, who you should support in the pinned comment down below. A girl went into the forest in order to search for brushwood. As she was tired, she laid down on her back beneath a shadowy tree, and soon fell asleep with her mouth open. So we can assume she has apnea. Suddenly, a large snake shot out beneath a root and rushed into the girl's mouth, into her body. Well, the girl woke up and saw with horror that her entire body had swollen enormously. She ran home and bemoaned her condition to her parents. Those immediately fetched for the physician, and when the latter had heard how the girl suffered this misfortune when she had been lying and sleeping in the forest, he immediately suspected that a snake had crawled into her body. He waited until exhaustion overcame the sick girl and she fell asleep. Then he put a bowl filled with milk next to her bed, opened her mouth, and told the mother to pay careful attention. It did not take long until the snake within the body of the girl smelled the lovely fragrance of the sweet milk, crawled out of the body, and hurried towards the bowl. Immediately, the physician and the mother jumped towards the girl, closed her mouth, and woke her up. Now the others wanted to attack the snake and kill it. But the physician shouted, "If ye slay the animal, the girl will be lost as well." So then they abstained from that goal, opened the door, and let the snake depart to the outside. But even this did not help. The girl, who had been a tall and strong maiden, became weaker and weaker and gradually wasted away until she died. Oh, man. I just want chat to know that I've read what they've said, but not aloud, for obvious reasons. I don't have Zevia tonight. Tonight I have Silver Can. Silver canned. It's certainly not branded. All right. How about another one of those style of tales? Although Uncle Kitty makes a good point. Yeah, I saw that, Witchery. Thanks. Um, Uncle Kitty makes a good point. What is with German reptiles and amphibians crawling into people? We had some tales from this collection too. Maybe a month ago, maybe a couple of months ago, that I read where a frog would go into a person's mouth. What was the effect of it? I'm blanking on it right now. I'm in a haze of heat, I'll be honest, and I don't think well in the heat. Frankly, I don't think well ever, but especially not in the heat. So you'll have to be my collective short-term and long-term memory chat. Hey, here's another disturbing story. All right. Our next story is called The Snake's Salvation. It takes a similar thread to the last one. It also has a content warning for body horror. And it also comes to us from Jürgen Hubert's Sunken Castle, Evil Poodles. A woman from Kippenheim, who was in an advanced stage of her pregnancy, once slept at noon in the vineyards of the area. Not at noon in a vineyard. Then a snake crawled into her open mouth. Her small daughter, who was sitting next to her and noticed this, attempted to grab the snake by its tail and pull it back, but it was too late. It slithered into the body of the woman and vanished within her. There it remained calm and did not cause any further complaints for the woman. I think I would have some complaints. It doesn't matter if it's causing distress or not. Hey, there's a snake in me. That's disturbing. However, when the woman gave birth to an infant soon after, the snake had wrapped itself around the child's head so tightly that it was only possible to detach it with a milk bath. But the snake did not part from the child's side, lay in bed next to it, and rather ate from its bowl. Because the child was not harmed by the snake and dearly loved the creature, the parents left the two of them together without disturbing them. 6 years had passed in this manner when the snake once did not want to eat the overly large chunks of bread in milk soup. The child grew so angry over this that they struck the snake's head with the spoon and spoke the word, "Eat the chunks as well, not just the broth." From that moment on, the snake became very sad, and after some time completely vanished from the house. It was searched for everywhere, from the roof to the cellar, and finally in the huge pile of rubble which had lain undisturbed in the yard since the Swedish War. Deep within it they found a cauldron of money, and the snake was lying next to it, clearly dead. Suddenly, I know you thought that was the end, but it's not. Suddenly, it was gone, and a snow-white man appeared in its place and spoke, "I was the snake, and the child was destined to release me. Now you will have the money and are rich, but I shall have eternal bliss." After these words, he vanished. What the hell was that? There's two things that stand out for me about this story. One is just something that is eternally fascinating to me about folklore, which is, we see these pieces of these stories from other regions and other collectors that we have already covered. There's this repeated motif of the girl hitting a snake and for not eating the chunks out of the milk bowl. But in this one, her doing that kills it, and somehow that frees it. And then they get a cauldron of money that was buried in a leaf pile. Everyone agrees this is very weird. GS says, does Germany even have bad snakes? I mean, I don't know. I suspect they do. Europe is a place of snakes. Does have a lot more snakes than, for example, in Canada. We're going to see some more tales about a snake called a Hazel worm, which is a real snake. Just as not one story had any apparent logic. This is the best part of folklore. You are left to weave together this nonsense. It engages the audience to make sense of it. Witchery says you have to remember that a lot of people drink beer as water constantly. True. I could go for a cauldron of money, though. Well, find yourself a vineyard when you're pregnant. Fall asleep with your mouth open and hope the snakes come. Although you live in Australia, I don't know if it's going to be the same outcome if a snake comes along. You have slightly more threatening snakes than I imagine Germany does. All right. Carrying on. Jess says, I googled German snakes, only 2 are venomous. Yeah, I wouldn't think that. None of these stories seem to describe the snakes as being venomous, so I don't think that was a real concern. Jumpstore says, I saw a meme where there was a picture of a wallet full of money with the caption, as a child of God, what is your next move? Move me to thank him. All right, speaking of drinking beer as water, let's talk about this next story. This next story is called The Huge Snake in Olpe, which also comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated by Jürgen Hubert, who you should support in the pinned comment below. A few years ago, a farmer from Zelbach near Olpe was busy cutting grass on a mountain slope. He suddenly beheld a large snake, which was many meters in length and as thick as a stovepipe. When he ran towards it in order to observe the gigantic animal from up close, it had suddenly vanished. Even though no opening in the ground could be seen anywhere. Many people from this area have seen this snake, which never harmed anyone. Finally, a few well-equipped hunters went forth to kill it, and they indeed found the snake after a lengthy search, shot at it, but did not hit it. And since this day, the snake has not been seen again. I think what I like about this theory is, like, it's told as a great legend of a magic snake, but what it sounds like is just a snake existed and maybe got killed. Like he says, he could see no opening around. Well, so there's lots of like hidden little burrow holes in a field or in a forest. Like there's plenty of ways for that to have happened. And then they're like, they shot at it but did not hit it, and then they never saw it again. I don't know, maybe they did hit it. They just thought they didn't hit it. All right, carrying on. Our next tale is called The Snake Haunting in Würzburg. It also comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated by Jürgen Hubert, who you should support in the pinned comment. There is a tavern with the name Zur Stadt Frankfurt in Würzburg. On the other side of the main river, and within the so-called main, are Burkharder Viertel, district. People in this house tell of a strange haunting. For every 7 years, an evil spirit haunts the premise in the form of a huge snake. And this snake crawls around the entire house beneath the floorboards. And every few moments it thrashes its tail so that the entire house shakes from this. The locals could not report anything about the reason for this haunting. Sounds like bad foundations, but, you know, it is what it is. Jumpstart says Rory just summoned a demon with that one. Sehr Stadt Frankfurt. One of the things I do appreciate about folklore, about hauntings and stuff, is that they don't, because they're not written by an author who has like an idea. They're trying to get along like a metaphor about the ghosts. They're meant to be very literal tales about ghosts. There's this added element of they're like, we don't know what it's about, and we may never. And I think that there is a sort of that's something that like urban legends and folklore and stuff can get away with. That makes them very appealing. You can't really get away with that in a normal story because people just get mad at you. They know you wrote it, and it just feels like you're being lazy. All right. We have a couple of other strange ones here. And then we're going to finish out with 3 tales about someone called Dr. Theophrast, who is a sort of I can't think of his name. Wow, the heat really has cooked my brain because this is a name I should be able to pull. The one who's famous for taking the devil's deal in Goethe's writing. Boy, I can't think of it. Anyways, it's one of my more popular sections that I've read, which is just basically, it belongs to that genre of things where it's like the doctor or somebody who is educated at university actually knows like black magic of some sort. But it's going to be, they're all 3 stories, sort of renditions about a snake. So that's what's to come. Our next story is called The Snake Catcher. Oh, Jess says Faust. That is correct. Faust was the name I could not pull in my head. Yes, it's a very Dr. Faust type character. Our next tale is called The Snake Catcher. It comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated by Jürgen Hubert, who you should support. A mage in Salzburg bragged that he planned to gather all snakes who dwelled within a mile of his location into a pit and kill them. But as he attempted this, a large old snake approached at the end. As he dared to attempt to force it into the pit with words of magic, it sprung up, wrapped itself around him so that it tied itself around his waist like a girdle and dragged him into the pit where it killed him. Doesn't say how, but it sounds like he might have squeezed him to death. Where's your magic now, mage? Didn't seem to help with that constrictor. Our next Our next tale is called Hahnunk. The Hahnunk. From Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, translated German folklore by Jürgen Hubert. A simple stone cross stands on a steep path near Kuniswinter in the direction of Drachenfels Mountain. Surrounded by vineyards, it is said that on certain nights, the Hahnunk sits on it which is a gargantuan snake wearing a shiny golden crown, the gemstones of its crown allegedly radiating so much light that both the snake and the objects surrounding it can be clearly seen. Jump Store says, bro was opponent of F around and find out. Indeed. This is a really cool image in my mind. Like, it's not even really a tale exactly. It's just a cool image. And now we get to our last three tales. They have a little more meat on the bones than the last few. They are tales. About a Hazel worm and this Dr. Theophrast. So our next tale is called Dr. Theophrast and the Hazel worm. It concerns what the next few of us stories concern, this doctor who is a bit of a jerk. There is widespread knowledge in Zillertal Valley, in the Eltbachtel Valley, and indeed in the entire Lower Inn Valley, about a miracle doctor who came from Innsbruck to Eltbach. He was a master in the black arts, practiced miracle cures and sorceries with the assistance of the devil, and captured the Hazel worm. This worm dwelled in a mountain cave near the village of Eltbach, and its capture only succeeded after the greatest efforts and after overcoming significant difficulties. Now, the name of the doctor only lives on in a mutilated form in the memories of the rural valley dwellers. Freistel, Frattel, or Pratschel. But everything, particularly the repetition of known legends which are still circulating about the famous Theophrastus, Theophrastus Paracelsus in Vienna and Salzburg, which were altered to set them in the Innsbruck region, indicates that none other than Theophrast himself was meant by this, and he was called Dr. Scrisis both here and in Hall. It's mostly just a discussion of his name, so if that didn't mean anything to you, don't worry, you don't need to understand it. The Hazel worm, about which will be said more later in this section about the animal world of superstition. Remember, this is a collection of German folklore, so that is the collector speaking to you, is a white snake which repeatedly shows up in quite a few legends. Consuming it teaches you the language of all creatures, and it gives the eyes the power to see through stone and behold where within the lap of the rocks veins of precious metals and grottos of crystals and gemstones can be found. Dr. Theophrast had to dwell in Eltbach for a long time before he succeeded in the difficult capture of the Hazel worm. During this period, he practiced miracle cures of all kinds and filled the valleys with the fame of his art and science. As the Hazel worm had now been captured, the doctor, who had to travel hurriedly overland in order to reach a person who had fallen dangerously ill, commanded his servant to boil the worm, preserve it well until the doctor returned, and under no circumstance eat anything of it. Well, Dr. Theophrast's servant cooked the worm as he had been commanded, but because of the prohibition of his master, he felt a strong desire for the worm. For he was smart enough to realize that the worm must have contained truly distinguished abilities. Thus, he cut a piece out of the insides of the worm and ate it, and then prepared the creature for his master. And when the latter returned, he ate the hazel worm with great relish. However, the mind of the servant brightened considerably. A whole new world opened up before him, but he remained quiet. He heard what the birds spoke to each other, and what the dogs barked, and the cats meowed, and the horses neighed, and he enjoyed this knowledge very much. Once he accompanied his master on a journey into the Inn Valley. Then 2 magpies were sitting in a tree, and twittered against each other in an abominable manner. They disparaged each other, hurled the greatest insults against each other, and said the worst invectives to each other, and all because of a mouse which one of them had caught. The servant enjoyed this so much that he laughed out loud. In astonishment, his master, Theophrast, turned towards him and asked him why he laughed. "I'm laughing because of the magpies," replied the servant. "They insult each other as if they were 2 physicians having a row over a patient." And it was then Theophrast knew what had happened, and that his servant would become his rival. Thus he pulled his sword and cut off the servant's head. Uncle Kitty says, eating dragons always seems to allow you to understand critters. Yeah, that's one of the claims, isn't it? All right. Carrying on to another version of this tale, slightly shorter than the last. Our next tale is called Dr. Theophrast and His Servant. And it also comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles. It contains similar features to the last tale, with some notable differences. According to another legend, Dr. Theophrast did not capture the hazel worm on his own, but a farmer captured it and presented it to the doctor, as he knew that he was collecting all sorts of curiosities of the natural world. The rest occurred in the same manner as we heard in the previous story. As the doctor's servant had subsequently eaten something from the worm, he saw everything as if it was bright and clear, even to the greatest distance. In fact, he saw how his master, who was riding home, stopped his horse at a green meadow and climbed down, plucked flowers. But the doctor could not be seen with ordinary eyes, for he was still far away and behind a hill covered by frost. And as the doctor arrived home, the servant was overcome to share the brand new knowledge which he had received, and he thus spoke. "Oh, what a great bouquet of flowers have you plucked on that meadow where you climbed off the horse?" "Oh, you blackguard!" screamed the doctor, who was fiery red from anger. "Where does this knowledge come from? You have eaten from the worm of knowledge, you miscreant, and for this reason you must die, for no one must have this knowledge but me, your master Theophrast." Shouting this, he pulled his sword and stabbed the servant, who dropped dead. Jumpstar says, since magpies can mimic human language, wouldn't it be funny if the magpies were just repeating words they heard to the servant and you just thought the servant ate the dragon? Uncle Kitty says, well, that took a violent turn. They all do. They all do. Our final story of the night is called Birds and Flowers Talk, but it is also a Theophrast story. It also comes to us from Jürgen Hubert, from his collection Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles. This legend of Dr. Theophrast and his servants changed into manifold forms, Both rode together after the servant had tasted of the hazel worm. The magpies cursed, the servant laughed. The master noticed the latter, but did not act the same. That is to say, he acted as if he had not noticed the laughter of the servant. Both riders now passed by a farm, where they saw a hen lead her chicks around, and as the hen heard the clopping of the horses, she clucked and shouted at her young to flee, but the gate was in the way, and then the hen shouted to her young, "Whoever cannot fly over it should slink through it," and flew over the gate. And the strongest of her young flew over after her, but the weaker ones slink through the poles of the gate close to the ground. The servant of Theophrast was greatly amused by this, and he had to laugh loudly. Even more so than he had laughed about the curses of the magpie, and the doctor heard his servant laugh, but he did not laugh as well, although he made his own conclusions. Soon after, the riders reached a flower-covered meadow, which was filled with noises. As the flowers and herbs saw the doctor, they instantly rose up and extolled their good properties, the bogbean, which was good against fever, the valerian, which worked against cramps, the chamomile, which helped with headaches, mint, which cured stomach aches, dandelion was good for the chest, the sage was good for the teeth, and sweet clover good for the stomach. And so Centauri, Gentian, and Sweet Flag. So were, rather. When suddenly a tiny red flower jumped up and screamed with a delicate voice, and so loudly that it echoed in the ears, "I am good for the shit, for the red and the white." Well, the dear little flower meant dysentery, but as it had never left its meadow and been in more respectable circles, it followed the rural customs as it was used to and expressed itself in the manner of farmers. That's why it's called vulgar language, vulgar being Latin for common. But the servant was unable to contain his laughter, for he'd never witnessed something like the innocent nature of this flower before, and now, like in the two prior legends, the sad turn followed after the merry joke, which is an elaborate way of saying he killed him. Yeah, Jump Store says, and marijuana, good for the soul. You know, I had a friend whose father was a really quite the hippie who grew his own weed. And just, if you ever needed to fill space in a conversation, you just had to ask him about what that process was like, because it just went on forever. And so in my mind, if you were speaking to a weed plant, it would just be like, oh man, no. Okay, so my soil is a pH this and blah, 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 that. And I'm this strain, but I think I can hybrid with that strain. Uncle Kitty says Theophrast is a bad doctor. I guess it depends. You don't want to be his servant. I actually really like these tales, where a lot of the... Gia says, everyone knows if you swear in falsetto, YouTube can't detect it. Well, YouTube can't detect me anyways, so who cares? It's a terrible service. What was I going to say now? I like this tale better than the Faust tales, because before Goethe sort of did his rendition of Faust being a guy who gets this kind of bad deal from the devil or whatever, the Faustian bargain, he's a folklore character that kind of just does fantastical things based on his abilities with dark magic from the devil. And there are implications that he pays a price for it and he worries about it and whatever else, but it's mostly just a dude who does fantastical things, and rarely with much reason, or whatever else. But and we had that one from Iceland, whose name slips my mind as well, but that one from Iceland who was the same, who sort of he learned the devil's secrets and then outsmarts him. But what I like about these Theophrast stories is they have a very specific point to make about this guy who is just so self-involved, so greedy that it's not just knowledge, he needs to be special, and he won't share it with anyone. This sense of like he has secrets, but he refuses to share it, makes him a much more compelling and interesting character to me. Jumpstore says Rory experiences memory lapses through the stream. Me, he found my stash. I don't need a stash to have a bad memory. I had a bad memory since I was a child. As I like to say, if I got dementia, no one could tell. Uncle Kitty said, I've seen videos, speaking of YouTube's inconsistent system, I've seen videos that should violate standards, have been up for years, but others that aren't bad that disappear within the afternoon. Yeah, I think actually every creator, from absolutely micro channels like mine up to big ones, are just basically at a point where we're like, I don't know what YouTube wants anymore, and I don't care. Like, a lot of people, that's why a lot of people went to like Patreon and other payment models, just because it was becoming insane for a lot of people to figure out what monetization was even going to happen. Like, unless you're just making unboxing videos with nothing untoward or controversial or even an opinion expressed, at some point someone can just, if that was your job, if that was your money, you would just lose that money. Like, it's garbage. The problem is that, well, you can replace something like Twitter pretty easily with Mastodon and other Fediverse iterations. You can even do that with things like Instagram and stuff like that with their Pixel Fed, I think it's called. It's not so easily done for video. Video is a lot more demanding and on space and bandwidth than whatever else. So it is a lot harder to replace YouTube with an open source alternative. There are open source alternatives. I've looked into them. Like one's called PeerTube. But they just, it's not the same equation. Witchery says ASMR videos are getting taken down where people aren't showing their face, even if the top isn't scandalous. Like, who knows, right? Like, I remember at one point I wanted to send someone, I was doing like it's sort of an accountability buddy thing for exercise with somebody on Discord. And we would send like private messages back and forth to confirm that we'd done our daily exercise. And I tried to send them a photo of me, like, finished my exercise, my arms up, flexing, like, I'm wearing a shirt. I'm just a normal guy dressed, doing a selfie of me flexing my bicep. And it got flagged and it wouldn't send it. And I don't know why. There was no option to do anything else. I just had to give up. Tammy says, Rory, do you think you might bring back the Thursday stream? I've never given up on the concept of doing a Thursday stream again, but there's kind of two things that stand in the way. The first is I need to think up an approach that is a bit more sustainable than what I was doing, because 50 games a year, it was running out of options. There's a lot of indie games out there, but that actually fit how the stream works. The trouble is if I repeat a game the numbers drop right off. Most people show up to see how a game works, and they're not super interested in coming back. But the second issue is just energy. My primary goal right now is to figure out some career stuff for myself. So I've been taking that time to do that. But no, I like playing games, and I like writing, and I enjoyed the Thursday streams. I haven't given up on them, but I don't think I could do much good with them right now. So we'll see. You'll see when I figure it out. There was a couple of times there where I was like, okay, I'll do this. And then when I looked into it more after making that promise on stream, I realized it wasn't going to work. So we'll see. Witchery says it detects a body but no face and deletes whole channels? Really? That's wild. Is that because that's like some trigger that it might be adult content, or why? All right. Well, that is enough talking from me. There is a bunch of stories about snakes, the legendary snakes of Germany. Witcher says, I've been trying to remember this stream, but I'm usually running errands. That's okay. The stream is not a chore. You do it when you can. As far as me, I'm going to go turn my air conditioning on. We can all imagine that this fireplace is for some reason blowing cold air. Witchery says they've decided they're sexual. Yeah, weird. Yeah, you can definitely get further with violent content, can't you? Uncle Kitty said there's a lot of adult content YouTube doesn't block. There is, for sure, yeah. It's not consistent. Uncle Kitty says I once looked for a Brazilian wrestler and got a very different type of Brazilian. Well, I miss you all, of course. Missed you last week. Sorry I wasn't here. I will thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Jump Store, Tammy Morelli, Uncle Kitty, Witchery, GS, anybody else I may be forgetting, and anybody else who's out there lurking. You folks, have a good sleep. Maybe I won't keep the fire going this time, though. Maybe I'll pour ice in your bed. Have a good sleep.
you.